That's right, fellas. Debuting in October of 2019 and getting a huge boost from the pandemic, mere months later came a new card game called Flesh and Blood. And this card game hit hard. Flesh and Blood dominated tournament scenes pretty quickly over the course of the next year that it would be out, from 2020 to 2021. And it hit crazy hard, to the point where it became a really expensive card game to play, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. It can make it hard to get your hands on some of those cards that you really want, but honestly, with the newer sets releasing Blitz decks, you can just buy a deck of Flesh and Blood and you're good to play. Although again, with the sets getting so expensive so quickly after they release, it is kind of hard to build your deck the way that you want to. The name Flesh and Blood comes from the mantra of the card game to be played in person, in your flesh and blood. So as far as we know, there probably will not be a digital version of Flesh and Blood. But that's okay. Since it is a new card game, you do have easy access to the cards and you can buy them pretty easily. I like Flesh and Blood because it takes everything that I like from Magic the Gathering's Commander format and puts it into its own contained card game. It's kind of like everything that I love from Chaotic and Magic just kind of came together into one. And I don't think there's really much else that I can say. Flesh and Blood is still fairly new to the card game circuit, so let's go ahead and take a look at the gameplay basics. Now, much like Magic the Gathering, Flesh and Blood has a couple of different formats that you can play in. Today, I'm going to show you in the Blitz format, which is just a smaller, faster version to play Flesh and Blood. Now we're going to start by setting our deck down and setting our field up. So I'm going to lay out the field really quick. Now, in Flesh and Blood, you can set up your field pretty much however you want, but this is a basic field setup. Here we've got your deck. Below your deck, we've got your banish zone. We have your pitch zone next to your deck, and then we have your discard pile above your deck. Here we have your hero and your hero's weapon or weapons. Here we have your equipment, which in order go head, chest, arms, and legs. Under the hero here, we have your arsenal section, which we're going to talk about in just a moment. And then up here, we have your combat chain, which is your main battlefield. When we're looking at our Flesh and Blood cards, the first card we're going to be looking at is our hero card. Now, the first thing we're going to look at with our hero card is down in the bottom right-hand corner, where we'll find our life total. This is just your starting life for the game, and normally with young heroes it'll be 20, and with regular heroes it'll be 40, just given what kind of deck you're playing. Young heroes are generally used for Blitz, and regular heroes are used for regular Flesh and Blood. Now, down in your lower left-hand corner of the hero card, you're going to find the inspiration. These are the amount of cards you're going to be drawing into at the end of each of your turn. You're always going to have a hand of the size of your inspiration. Looking at the cards for your general deck, you're going to have 4 different things that you're going to notice. Up in the top left-hand corner, you're going to notice these 3 dots, sometimes filled in with red. This is the pitch value of your card. Essentially, your pitch value is like how much your card taps for mana, if we're speaking in Magic terms, which I'm only using because most people understand Magic terms more than other terms. Say your card only has 1 red dot in their pitch value, that means when you pitch it, it'll only pay for 1, and then pay for 2 and 3, respectively, to the other 2 dots. Up in the upper right-hand corner of your card, you're going to notice a pitch cost. This is how much you have to pitch from your hand to play this card. While the maximum pitch value so far has been 3, the pitch cost can be pretty high, going up to as far as, I believe the highest pitch cost card right now is 15 or 16. So pitch cost can get crazy, and it's going to require you to strategize a lot with your deck. Next up, at the very top of the card, right above the nameplate, you'll find the color. The colors in order are red, yellow, and blue. And these generally indicate what the pitch value of your card is going to be, the pitch cost, and how effective that card is going to be. Red cards are the strongest, but they have a low pitch value, and blue cards are the weakest, but they have a high pitch value, so you can pitch them for more. Down in the lower left-hand corner of the card, you will find an attack, usually, if there's an attack action. If it's not an attack action, it won't have one here. But attack actions have an attack value, which can be increased or decreased by other card effects. You know, normal attack stuff. You're going to be dealing this much damage to your opponent's hero. And finally, down in the lower right-hand corner of the card, you'll find a defense value on some cards. This value indicates how much damage you can block with this card. Much like in Magic the Gathering, when your opponent attacks you, you can use cards to block your opponent's attack, which we'll exemplify in just a moment. To play Flesh and Blood, you start off by drawing your hand up to your hero's inspiration. So for Levia, our inspiration is going to be 4. We then look at the cards in our hand, we're going to look at their pitch value and their pitch cost, and we're going to pay accordingly. When you pitch in Flesh and Blood, you take a card and you put it into your pitch zone. You use the pitch value up in the upper left-hand corner to pay for other cards. So say I pay for Endless Maw and I deal 6 damage to my opponent's hero. At the end of the turn, you're going to take your pitch card, all of the cards in your pitch pile, and put them at the bottom of your deck. Alternatively, some cards will have a pitch value in their text box that will allow you to do certain things. In Flesh and Blood, you get 1 action point per turn, which means you can only do 1 action per turn. So my Endless Maw here that I just pitched for was my 1 action. However, if a card says go again, or if a card says that I gain another action point, I get to do another action. Now, since I have my Endless Maw swinging at my opponent for 6 damage, this damage is going to go straight through to their life, which is, at this point in time, we're going to assume 20. Say my opponent doesn't want to take 20 damage, so they can look at their hand, and they can take this card, which has a defense cost of 3, and throw it down. They've now blocked 3 of my 6 damage, and the remaining 3 will go through to their health. Alternatively, my opponent can choose to keep throwing down cards to block with until all of the damage that they would take is reduced to 0. You can use opportunities like this to strategize and make sure that you're using cards in your hand to your benefit. In Flesh and Blood, a couple different things happen during the combat chain. First, the turn player decides to attack. The player who is being attacked can decide to defend in response. Then, the turn player can choose to use an attack reaction card, if they have one in their hand, in response to the defense from the attacked player. The player that is being attacked can then choose to respond with a defense reaction card if they have one in their hand or in their arsenal. This chain happens per action per turn. Now, at the end of our turn, we're going to take all of the cards that we attacked with this turn and put them into our discard pile. And then, at the end, you get to decide whether or not you want to arsenal a card. When you arsenal a card, you take a card and put it face down in your arsenal pile to use for later. Utilizing your arsenal is important in Flesh and Blood and can help you get the maximum out of your hand size. And then at the end of my turn, I'm going to replenish my hand by drawing up to my inspiration number, making sure that I can properly defend myself on my opponent's turn. Lastly, if it's the first turn of the game, at the end of the first turn player's turn, both players draw up to their inspiration. Otherwise, you only draw at the end of your turn. And those are the gameplay basics of Flesh and Blood. I'm pretty sure that I didn't forget anything, but if I did, I'm sure that future me has it handled and will just clip it in at some point in time in there. But as I was saying before, I love Flesh and Blood. I played it once and got hooked immediately. I love this game. I love everything about it. It's got a whole strategic narrative to it that I just find really fun and fascinating. So how would I rate this card game? Well, first of all, let's talk about availability. Like I said before, Flesh and Blood is kind of an expensive card game to get into, but if you just want to play and not worry about building your own deck, I would definitely recommend going up and picking up a Blitz deck. They're usually between $10 and $15, maybe $20 if the price is really dipped, but as far as I've seen, they haven't really gone up in price all that much. Original hero decks are pretty pricey, which is why I recommend going for Blitz. Anyway, back to the point, my final rating on this game. While Flesh and Blood isn't the most perfect game in the world, I do feel like it's a fun game to get into, and especially if you're one of the competitive, really strategic thinking types, I think it's a really good game for you to try out. I would give Flesh and Blood an 8 out of 10. This video took a little bit of time to get out. I really hope it doesn't feel rushed. I kind of feel like I'm rushing, but I also, at the same time, can't think of anything else to say about this card game. But I don't know, you can tell me in the comments below. Next time, we're going to be talking about a card game that I have desperately been trying to avoid, and then we're going to move on to card game reviews of card games that I haven't actually gotten to play in real life, which is going to be fun. So, thank you for watching, and until next time, drink your water.